So good morning. I'm Josh Ginsberg. I am president of I'm not president of the Catskill Science Collaborative. I am president of the Carey Institute and oversee the Catskill Science Collaborative. We've got a bunch of attendees coming in, so I will just take a moment to thank everybody for coming. The run of show today will be, I will say a few words about the Catskill Science Collaborative and the Carey Institute. I'll hand off to the CSC, as we like to call it, manager, Kira Peterson, who will run the show. We have Allison Dervensky and Kelsey Parker, who will be giving presentations on their work in the Catskills. And then John Thompson will, as it were, bring it home. Got about 15 attendees, which is great. We'll give it another second. Curious to see, I have the list of attendees, but I'm curious, anybody coming in? Well, no, they're almost all familiar faces. People who are involved with the CSC and DEC and some students. It's great. So I will keep my intro very brief. If people don't know much about the Catskill Science Collaborative and the Carey Institute, go to careyinstitute.org. That's CARY Institute, one word, .org, and you can learn about it. And if in our search box you type in Catskill Science Collaborative, there's a whole website for it. Anyway, as I think most of you know, Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies is an almost 40-year-old institution based in Millbrook, New York. We like to study big ecological phenomenon, is probably the easiest way of saying it. We study disease ecology, forest ecology, freshwater ecology and urban ecology, climate change, invasive species, and really what we study is the interactions between and among all those things to look at life at the ecosystem level. We have about 100 staff, and we are based in the new Ecosystem Science Building, which is a reinvention of the old Plant Science Building, which is a new solar-driven green building that goes and riffs on the roots of the New York Botanical Gardens Plant Science Building, which was one of the first commercial solar buildings built in the country. Never worked quite right, but we now have one that does, and we're all going to be moving back in a couple of weeks, so it's very exciting. Anyway, many years ago, Gary and a bunch of other people founded CERM, the Catskill Environmental Research and Monitoring Program. And CERM did many things. The key thing was bringing everybody in the Catskills who works on Catskill science together every couple of years. And between the meetings, there were always great ideas. It was a really wonderful bottom-up group of people who get together. I went to some of the first things I did as a new president at Carey Institute 7 years ago was go to some of those meetings. And it was a bunch of really dynamic, committed people. But of course, everybody had a day job and maybe 2 day jobs. And so getting stuff done between those meetings to really catalyze science in the Catskills, both for management and for building a database of our knowledge of the Catskills, lagged behind. And so with generous support from the Department of Environmental Conservation through the Environmental Protection Fund, a few years ago, we started the Catskill Science Collaborative, and we have 3 goals. Goal number 1 is to do exactly what we're doing today, fund young researchers and their mentors to do science in the Catskills. This work is science that is, not all science is useful. We never know which science is most useful, but all science is useful. But these are science projects that really focus on applied needs of our partners in the Department of Environmental Conservation and the New York City Department of Environmental Protection that manages the watershed for New York City. We go through a process of talking and getting ideas, and then we find brilliant, dynamic, energetic young scientists who want to go out and spend time collecting data on the Catskills and helping us both improve our knowledge base and the management of that ecosystem. That's one thing we do. We also have started a database that is trying to pull together data sets, most importantly in partnership with the University of Massachusetts, the Mike Kudish data set. The amount of information between Mike's left and right ears will never be captured digitally, but we're trying to capture as much of it as we can, particularly the stuff that's already in writing. And then we also have a growing body of almost 1,000 papers about the Catskills that are in a Zotero database that we're going to make public. The last thing we do is outreach, and we do that again with a whole bunch of partners We're going to be working with the DEC, the Catskill Mountain Keeper, the Catskill Center for Conservation Development, possibly Beaverkill Watershed, the Beaverkill Land Trust and Woodstock Land Trust and other environmental groups in the Catskills, so we can get the science out to the communities, because we want people to understand the great role that science has in management. The last 4 years taught us not to take that for granted. I think we always thought we could. And we now realize that we need, for our communities, to understand that science gives you options. It doesn't tell you what to do, because management and policy, as all the DEC staff on this call and the DEP staff on this call know, is informed by many things, including politics, finance, community, resistance and or acceptance. But the science is a really important part of explaining to people what their options are. So that's why we have the Catskill Science Collaborative. We also have been raising some private money to help supplement the core grant from DEC, and are grateful for everybody who's supported us. I will now hand over to Kira, and actually I'm going to turn off my camera, and that way I can really enjoy listening to the talks. So thank you all for coming.
And thank you, Josh, for a great introduction. My name is Kira Peterson, and I am new to the Catskill Science Collaborative, and I have the pleasure of introducing Allison Darevensky, who is going to be telling us about her evaluation of stakeholder engagement in the Rondout and Neversink watersheds. And then we are going to hear second from Kelsey Parker, who is continuing and wrapping up a project from last year, which is called Mapping and Monitoring the Distribution of Hemlock Woolly Adelgid and Related Hemlock Decline in the Catskill Mountain region of New York using freely available multispectral satellite remote sensing. So without further ado, I'm going to let Allison start us off and fill us in on all the details of her wonderful work.
Hello, thank you, Kira, for that wonderful introduction. So I am Allison Darevensky. I am a dual master's student at Binghamton University studying sustainable communities and public administration. I am conducting my research on an evaluation of environmental communication in the Rondout and Neversink watersheds. My advisor is Dr. George Holmesy, who's the Director of Environmental Studies at Binghamton University. And my natural resource managers for this fellowship are Stacy Howell and Mark Vian from the Rondout Neversink Stream program. A quick overview of my project and my study area. So I'm studying in the Rondout and Neversink basins in the Catskills, which cross between Sullivan and Ulster counties, and they include the towns of Neversink and Denning, which are the main service towns that the Rondout Neversink Stream program caters to. And the program itself is located in Grahamsville, New York, which is very close to Neversink, within Neversink. And the main objective of this project is that the Rondout Neversink Stream program wants to increase stakeholder and community engagement in their programs, specifically about their stream management planning process. The program is updating their stream management plans, which come out every 10 years or so. And a stream management plan is a collection of ideas and plans that the program wants to enact in the community in order to protect the local streams, water quality, engage with community members and streamside residents in these basins. My research questions are, what are the current methods of sharing environmental information? How might communication methods need to change to reach other demographic groups in the Rondout and Neversink watershed? So I'm looking at how communication methods change based on different demographics such as age, geography, location, income, education level, etc. And my last question is, how can the Rondout Neversink Stream program increase stakeholder engagement in their programs and stream management planning process? My timeline so far has been as follows. I started this project last April when I was doing the preliminary literature review, and this is when I submitted my project proposal and got accepted to the Carey Institute Fellowship Program. This summer, I worked on research and creating my survey and interview questions and some data cleaning for the stream management program, going through all of their attendance lists of all their previous events to really see what kind of events the program has been putting on and the kind of engagement that those programs and events are receiving. This September through this November, I'm working on data collection through interviews and survey analysis, and I'm also doing my report outlining and completing a social media analysis for the program. So I'm looking at their Instagram and Facebook pages to see what kinds of engagement the program is receiving through those channels and seeing what kind of content they're putting out there. This December, I'm doing my report writing and editing, and the final report deadline is December 31st. So how does this project relate to natural resource management? The Carey Institute and the Rondout Never Sink Stream program really care about natural resource management and making sure that the research projects that are going on are really catering to conservation, protecting streams, local ecosystems, engaging with communities, that kind of thing. So from what I found in my literature review, effective communication, just as Josh was mentioning, really builds trust in the community and encourages people to relate to scientific information, relate to their local environment, get involved with management planning and other things related to, their local streams, local forests, etc. Connecting community members to local environmental issues and values helps us learn more about each community and what particular programs and events will cater to those community members and increase their engagement as well. Lastly, natural resource management plans need community support to be successful, such as the Rondout Never Sink Stream management plans. Without community support, those plans cannot be implemented because you need support, you need funding, you need people to really make those plans, events, projects, anything from streamside improvement, planting local species along streamside beds, to creating policies that prevent, pollution or prevent over dredging, things like that. You really need community support for those plans to be successful. So my methods for this project include, I'm completing a demographic analysis of the Rondout and Never Sink watershed to measure recent changes over the last 10 years. I'm using Social Explorer to collect the census data, and I'm using GIS, which is a mapping tool, to create maps of the watershed, and I'm overlaying the census data over the watershed maps to see visually how the area has changed demographically. I will go into a little bit more detail later on. I'm also analyzing community participation data, which I mentioned earlier, of past events in the Rondout Never Sink watershed. I created a spreadsheet of attendees and streamside residents. And that data collection and data analysis gave me a list of potential survey recipients. So I surveyed 1,012 streamside residents who received a mail-out survey, and the survey includes questions on how much they know about the current Rondout Never Sink stream management plans and what they expect to see in the updated plans. I'm also interviewing stream management program coordinators and educators, and these are folks that conduct outreach for their organizations, and I'm looking to see what communications they prefer and what they see are working in the field currently. And these are people from all over the country, and I will get into who I interviewed so far later on. I'm also conducting a social media analysis, which I mentioned before. So here are some preliminary maps that I created using the census blocks and census tract level. Census blocks are the smallest level of geographic data analysis that you can obtain using Social Explorer. These maps were created in ArcGIS Online. So I just pulled the census blocks from the ArcGIS Online program, and I overlaid it onto the Neversink and Rondout Basin map that I also created in ArcGIS Online. And there are census data for demographics available at both the block and tract level. I'm going to be combining these levels because there's different data available at the different levels. Census blocks provide more detailed data, but the census tracts have more data available because it's at a bigger data collection level. And I'll be looking at things such as age, geography, race, things that I mentioned earlier as well. For an update on my survey, out of the 1,012 surveys that the Rondout Neversink program mailed out, I received 95 responses so far, and the end date for submitting the survey is October 31st, the end of this month. It's coming up. I'm currently analyzing and going through those survey responses. The survey is a total of 5 pages, 2 double-sided pages of survey questions and 1 page to get involved. So that involvement page does ask for personal information, but it's going to be separated from the survey pages, so I can keep the survey responses anonymous. The last page will also be sent to the Rondout Neversink Stream Program office for their records. And this is a copy of the survey that I mailed out. So a couple of the questions include, how much do you know about the Rondout Neversink stream management plans, with the options to select, I don't know anything. So some people have never seen them, to I've attended a planning meeting and I've been part of creating the plans themselves. So people have the option to select their engagement with those plans. We're also gauging people's understanding of stream threats. So things like lack of flood management in streams, climate change, invasive species, very localized issues within the Rondout and Neversink basins that affect stream health. And we want to know how much people know or how much people are comfortable with those issues in terms of their knowledge. We're also asking another similar structured question where we're asking how much people agree or disagree with certain statements. This is to gauge people's opinions on different aspects of their community and values in order to understand how they understand environmental communication. So protecting swimming holes in the Catskills, that's a hot topic right now. And this is because you either are for the free use of land and swimming holes and want people to explore the Catskills more freely. And on the other hand, you want more protection because a lot of people are using the land and not treating it fairly. There's been instances of littering and pollution and just disregard for the land and quality. So we're trying to see what people are thinking about when they hear these kinds of topics. On the other page, we're asking basic demographics at the end. And we're also asking what people's preferred method of communication is. So anything from paper mail, email, social media. And we're also asking if people have internet access. Internet access is a very important question to ask because while we are, still in this pandemic and we've gone completely online with a lot of things, including this event. This event was supposed to be in person, but because of the circumstances, we're doing it online. And internet access is such an important question to ask because if people don't have internet, they most likely don't have social media. They most likely don't access email, online events like this are very hard to access. So we want to know what percentage of people in the area have internet and how much they use online resources. And the last page is about getting involved. So this is the page that will be separated among, as soon as I open the surveys. This is to ask if people would like to receive services from the Rondout Never Sink Stream program. And this is so the program can gauge how many people from the survey want to be involved with bank restoration, beautifying an area, if they want to volunteer, and if they want to receive any other services from them. My social media looks a little bit like this, social media analysis. So I've collected a lot of information on both the Instagram and Facebook accounts for the stream program. I'm looking at number of likes, comments, keywords within the comments, anybody who was tagged in a post, and the content subject. This is to understand what posts and what kind of content get the most engagement, which are the likes and comments, what kinds of comments people are leaving, if there are certain keywords that pop up more than once. I found out that the watershed wildlife photos that people from the community submit are some of the most popular. And that's really important to know, because community participation and engaging directly with community members by having them submit photos that they take and sharing that with the larger community is one way to bridge the gap between community member and program. My interviews have gone pretty well. I've done 2 so far, and I have 3 more scheduled. My goal is to have 20 interviews with natural resource management program coordinators or outreach coordinators across the country. So far, I've completed interviews with the Colorado Basin Roundtable and the Seminole County Education, Restoration, and Volunteer Program, also known as SERVE. Both interviewees so far have shared that COVID-19 obviously has been a major challenge for outreach. And obviously, it's incredibly difficult to conduct outreach to communities when everything is online, like I stated. Other challenges, though, include maintaining interest. So once a project is completed, how does the organization continue to gain engagement and retain interest in the community and for further projects and programs? The communication methods that came from both interviews so far, one is really interesting. It's community liaisons that SERVE uses, and they have picked particular people within the community that are seen as community leaders. They attend every stream or lake management event. They come and they're very excited about protecting their water quality and things like that. So they are designated as liaisons, and they manage communication between SERVE and the larger community. So they will organize in-person meetings, online gatherings. They will advertise events. They will email their neighbors, knock on doors, and tell people to come to different events. So I thought that was very interesting. Both organizations, Colorado Basin Roundtable and SERVE, also use in-person planning meetings and email lists. My next steps for this research include finishing the survey and interview data analysis, creating more GIS maps for demographic analysis, revising my literature review, finalizing my social media analysis, and final report writing. Here are my references and Q&A. So I will stop sharing, and I'd like to thank all of my everybody who's helped me on my project so far, including Dr. George Holmesy, Dr. Mixter, Carey Institute, Rondout Never Sink Stream Program, Stacy, Mark, and Haley, who are here today. Thank you very much for supporting me.
Thank you so much, Allison. Yeah, thank you so much. We had one question, but then you already answered it. So if anyone else has more questions, please feel free to write them and then I can read them out. Okay, so we've got one from George. community liaisons is a very interesting idea. Love to see that with other interviews if that happens elsewhere. How successful have those community liaisons been? Wish we had thought to ask a question on the survey about that. So what are
I
your thoughts?
agree. Based on the interview with Serve, the community liaisons have been very successful because they're able to communicate directly with their neighbors and community members, and they're seen as community leaders. So they're trusted within the community as opposed to the community relying solely on emails and any communication that comes directly from the program. So it's more like seeing a friendly face in the neighborhood and striking up a conversation about, oh, did you go to that lake management event last week? What did you think? Did you notice any problems with the lake, or are you having any issues on your property? How can we help? Things like that. And it seemed very, very useful.
And we have Gary Lovett asking, since the response rate was about 10%, do you think, Allison, that this means people are apathetic about the streams?
I don't think so. I think we just sent a lot of surveys very recently. The survey mail out process just started, and it's a very short window to respond due to time constraints of the project. So we're hoping to get a lot more responses in the next 2 weeks. But I don't think it's due to people being apathetic. I just think it's, the time. If we extended the time and started earlier, we might have gotten more responses or not. I can't particularly say.
Yeah, Josh agrees that 10% is a pretty impressive response rate for this kind of survey in this time span, and then asks, do you think that the traditionally and expected low response rate can be biased?
I think so. I haven't gone through all of the survey responses yet, so I will see if they all lean one way or another. We've also color coded the survey responses. So one color paper is for the Never Sink Basin and one color paper is for the Rondout Basin. So we will see if there's a trend within the basins themselves. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly yet.
All right, I'm going to leave a few more moments in case people have questions for Allison, and then we are going to turn it over to Kelsey if I don't see any more in the next minute or so. Allison, very good job. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kelsey, feel free to get us started.
I always hate that they put the share bar right at the top, making it in the way of everything. Right, so today I am going to talk about hemlock woolly adelgid and how we are monitoring their spread in the Catskills. So first of all, what is hemlock woolly adelgid? These small white aphids that you see at the base of this hemlock needle is hemlock woolly adelgid, or HWA for short. And they are an invasive species from Japan that was first spotted in the eastern US in Virginia in the 50s. And as you can see here, it's spread all the way up the East Coast in that 70 years, but really taking off in the 80s. And they are a concern because while they sit at the base of these needles, they are sucking the nutrients away from the hemlock trees, which slowly kills them. It can take Sometimes it takes just a couple of years, sometimes it can take a decade, but there are no like native predators in the Northeast. So they've really been able to proliferate widely, which is really concerning because hemlock trees are a keystone species in this region. They have a really dense canopy, which provides shelter for a variety of bird, mammal species. And that canopy also shades the ground underneath them, which can provide space for deer. When there's a lot of snow, there tends to be less snow beneath, so they can rest there. But it also provides a really cool and damp microclimate, which when there are lots of hemlocks around streams, as you can see in that top picture, they tend to grow there. They can actually cool down the stream systems, which provides favorable conditions for trout. So they are really important, and we don't have any other species in this region that can fit this niche if we were to lose the hemlocks. And currently there are two main ways that we go about looking for them. One is field surveys, which are very intensive, costly, you need a lot of people and it takes a lot of time. And you're limited in where you can go. You know, like some places just aren't easy to reach by foot or car, especially in the Catskills. So you're limited in that way. And then there are remote sensing studies, which use satellite imagery and the way that healthy versus unhealthy vegetation responds to light. So as you see here, healthy vegetation reflects much less visible light than unhealthy vegetation does. So we can look at the ratio between the amount of reflected near infrared and reflected visible light for a metric called Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, or NDVI. And it gives us a value on how healthy the canopy is in that area. So you can see here, all of these little circles are dead trees. And when you look down at this NDVI, the purple are low values, meaning low health. And you can see, especially where they are clustered together, you can actually see that decline in the NDVI. And one of the big problems is that there's not a lot of collaboration between the people working on the ground and those who are using remote sensing. It's very common in these remote sensing papers when they're published for the authors to say something about, you know, we really hope that this work can be useful for practitioners. But when you actually look through the paper, you know, one, the methods tend to be really difficult, whether they're using software programs that require extensive coding knowledge, or they're using data that's expensive. It's not necessarily easy to be, you know, replicated, especially by practitioners whose specialty is not remote sensing. And it's not in the scope of their job to be keeping up with this academic literature. So something we really wanted to focus on in while we were working on this was considering costs. So all of the images that we use are data that is freely available to the public. And we really wanted to make sure that whatever we were doing, we were using softwares and programs that either, you know, like ArcGIS, which is used by some practitioner groups, where practitioners wouldn't need to learn like a whole new job in order to use these methods, and that they could continue using these methods because, you know, the maps that we make are static. The infestation is going to change over time, and there's a need to keep monitoring And if you don't consider all of these other things, you can't, costs become too much, and data becomes too much. So we really wanted to make sure that our methods sort of bridge that gap that tends to happen. So we use 2 different satellites, Landsat, which has a 30-meter resolution and has data going all the way back to the 80s. And then we also used Sentinel, specifically Sentinel-2, which has a much higher spatial resolution of 10 meters, but the data only goes back to 2014. And we focused in on the growing season, so mid-June, mid-July for each year. And for Landsat, we looked at 2001 through 2020. We picked those years because the infestation seems to have really picked up in the Catskills around that time. So we were hoping that having this really long timeline could give us a better look at the progression of the infestation. And then we also used Sentinel-2 images from 2017 through 2021. And we used the Sentinel images in 2 different ways. So first we did a linear regression, which is the same thing we did with Landsat. And then we also used this really cool tool called Climate Engine. And it is this user-friendly web interface where you can analyze remote sensing data, but it is powered by Google Earth Engine, which is this amazing remote sensing tool that usually requires, some amount of coding knowledge, but is able to process a lot of this data a lot faster than you could, just using your computer. And it's really simple to use. It's just drop down boxes, which is good, but also you're a bit limited in what you can do with it. And there's a lot of data processing that happens sort of behind the scenes. So traditionally, when you download remote sensing data, it's not always corrected for atmospheric issues or clouds or things like that. And Climate Engine kind of just does all of that without you seeing it. So that is a downside for a lot of people to not really know what's happening with that. But it is an incredible tool. So since hemlock woolly adelgid really only infests hemlock trees, we used the National Land Class database from 2016, and we only focused our analyses on places with deciduous or mixed forests, which is this very dark green in here, and then the medium green as well. So that's what you see here, why it looks so gappy, because we really just wanted to look at places where hemlock woolly adelgid could be. So these are the results from Landsat from the 2001 to 2020 linear regression. When you look at the slopes, it's very, very low. So, we see areas of red, but that change is very mild. And we think that this happened for a couple of reasons. One, the timeline was just so long that you pick up a lot of noise and variations over time. But also because Landsat's resolution is 30 meters, if you look at just one pixel, you can have 20 trees in that pixel. One is a dying hemlock, or 2 are dying hemlocks, but the other 18 are, birch that are doing really well and might actually be doing even better in the short term as they pull resources from the dying hemlock trees. So there's even more noise within the pixel because of the nature of the forest. So we focused it in on this area of Landsat for the Sentinel analysis. And I specifically highlighted some places where there was definite decline on some level in the Landsat imagery. So on the left, we have the regression, linear regression. So the same method we used for Landsat. And then on the right is what we found using Climate Engine, which used something called send slope. It's another type of regression, but it does not assume linearity. So that's the key difference between the two of these. And since Climate Engine processes the data on their own servers, it's easier to add a lot more data into your analysis than it is if you're doing it another way. So we can see with the regression, it definitely, there's not too much happening. It's a lot of the, very little change. But with the Climate Engine, it does pick up on some of these areas of decline, but also there is a lot of what looks like increases in vegetation health happening. So I wanted to explore this a little bit, and we used these stands from CRISP. They were monitored in 2014, and each stand was given a health assessment, so from healthy to severe decline. And the healthy stands are in green, and then it goes all the way down to red for the most severe. And you can see here with the regression, it's a lot like what we saw before, very low level, if any, change over time. But when you look at Climate Engine, these severely declining stands are doing pretty well. After, so this is from 2017. So 3 years after they were, in severe decline, they are now doing really well. And this one that was in good health now looks like it's starting to decline in some areas. So when I looked at Google Earth, so this is one of the stands. This stand with Landsat, we found very little change. And the way that Landsat pixels are, so we actually took every pixel in this and counted the area of dead hemlock in the pixel, and even the pixel with the most dead hemlocks, it was only 10%. So that explains a bit of why Landsat maybe wasn't working for us. But this is what the stand looked like in 2015. Focused in on this area, you can see in 2015, there are all of these dying hemlock trees. Is all of that gray that's happening. But in 2019, there's a couple, you can still see some, but it's mostly gone. So what Climate Engine was seeing was these stands completely losing hemlock and then likely growing, birch or something that is replacing it and picking up on that stand coming back to good health, but just without the hemlocks. And it really highlights some of the challenges that we've had with this project, that, one tree can be dying and the tree next to it can be, thriving, and that really complicates our signals. And then this stand that was, healthy in 2014, if we zoom in on it in 2013, you don't really see, there's a couple, little dead hemlock trees. But by 2019, this whole spot is just littered with dead trees. And this is exactly where in this here, we saw that decline happening. So Climate Engine did a pretty good job of picking up, at least it picked up this decline, but it also picked up really well the regeneration of the forest after hemlock loss. So to conclude, spatial resolution is really important. So is temporal, depending on, what years you're looking at, you can get really different results, especially in a place like the Catskills where HWA has been there for a pretty long time. So there are areas that have already, lost all of their hemlocks and are already being replaced by other trees. Well, there are other places that are just starting to become infested. So it really just highlights the challenges with using this remote sensing stuff. And even when we had really high resolution, the decline really didn't seem to be linear. And I think that's why the climate engine picked up on a lot more than the linear regression did, because it just really isn't linear. There's so much variation from year to year naturally, and then you add these trees dying and then coming back as different species and all of that, and it really complicates things. And using multiple different satellite sensors can be really helpful, but also it was just really helpful to have people on the ground that do this in the field all the time, helping us and having data from them and understanding the behaviors of hemlock woolly adelgid. So moving forward, this project has really taught us a lot about monitoring hemlock woolly adelgid, and it's really just like the first step of what we want to do with this. We're starting to apply some of what we learned here to the Adirondacks and detect hemlock woolly adelgid early on. It's a much newer infestation, which comes with its own challenges and also, some benefits. There's not as much noise, but we learned so much that we're going to be taking into the Adirondacks. And we really want to continue this conversation of best practices and how we can collaborate together and really push forward the science on this. And we actually just published a paper. It will be officially published on Friday, but we talk about how we want to bridge this gap and how we think, we can do it and what some of the benefits would be. So that is something fantastic that came out of this project as well. And any questions?
Kelsey, I just wanted to say congratulations on your great work, and you've overcome a lot of challenges in dealing with the data that you had to find, track down, and work with. And also congratulations on the remote sensing paper. That was a great job by you. Thanks
Thank you.
for all your good work.
Yes, Kelsey, congratulations on your paper. And we have a question from Alison Derevensky saying, well, Alison, do you want to ask your own question since you are here?
Sure, I'll ask. Thank you. That was a really interesting presentation. I was wondering if you have any specific practices that you mentioned in your paper about how we can improve communication between remote sensing researchers and practitioners, because that's directly related to what I'm doing, is improving communication style.
Yeah. So, I mean, it has been a long process, but I think a lot of it is just like getting together and having those conversations, and being open to what everyone has to offer and things like that. And we were really fortunate that, Andy, I couldn't make it, but Andy went to some stakeholder meetings, and just like the level of support that we received in those meetings was just incredible. And I know that's not always the case, but at least in the Catskills, it seems like people really care and want to be involved. which is a huge benefit for us. Yeah, and so improving communication, part of it is just not relying so much on publishing all of your results. Well, I mean, publishing, but like not just publishing. We really want to, we've talked about doing workshops where we can kind of teach people how we did this and like the basics of remote sensing data. So if you understand the data, you can use Climate Engine for quite a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
We've got another one from Gary Lovett. When hemlocks have hemlock woolly adelgid, they can go through cycles of good years and bad years. Do you think the recovery you're seeing could be hemlock rather than other species replacing it?
It's possible. I looked at some of the fall images compared to the summer images to see if a lot of it was actually hemlock. And yeah, it can be that, if it's really dry, hemlocks tend to do really bad. And then they might recover a little bit when there's better weather conditions. Yeah, so there I'm sure there is some of that, but some of it has been losing hemlocks.
Thank you. And then finally, we've got George Holmesy again. You spoke about practitioners. Have you seen any connections to citizen scientists? Can they use the technology and can they help?
Yeah, so that's actually something that we talk about in the paper, is getting people involved. And developing apps that can be used by anyone who wants to become a part of it, and trying to really promote that. We're hoping that with the paper that'll open up a lot more discussion on that. Yeah, but definitely there's a place for citizen scientists. There is IMAP invasives, which you can, report sightings of different invasive species. I know that data has been useful to people, but yeah, there's so much that citizen scientists can do to help. And if, they could use the data as well.
So no new questions at the moment, just another response from Andrew Reinman to Gary's question saying, yes, that adds to the difficulties for sure. In the example that Kelsey focused on, it maybe many of the trees were dead, so that could increase the NDVI regeneration. Any other questions for Kelsey? Now is the time. Seems like maybe no more questions, just congratulations for a really great job well done to both of our speakers. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who came. We really appreciate your participation and your interest in the Catskill Science Collaborative. Yeah.
I just also want to see if John has anything to say, but also say to both the speakers, great job, really important work. I particularly like that you're sort of integrating social and ecological pieces of this, which is so critical to management. I will remind people that pretty soon we're in conversations already with our partners, and pretty soon we'll be issuing a new request for proposal for next summer. So those of you who are academics and students, start thinking about new projects, and we'll be getting back to all of you. If you'd like to get on the list to receive the RFP, please email Kira Peterson. That would be Peterson, Petersonk at caryinstitute.org. That's CARYinstitute.org. So John, why don't you bring it home, and thank you again, Allison and Kelsey, for great job.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I just want to point out that thanks to the Catskill Science Collaborative, we've had the opportunity to be able to participate in some great research projects and actually try to work on that researcher and manager gap. And I think that's what the Catskill Science Collaborative has done so well, to make those connections so that we can work with scientists to get the research that we need in order to better manage our beautiful place on the ground, the Catskills. So thanks, Josh and Kira, and thanks to all the researchers that are working in the Catskills. I really appreciate it. It's really important for what we do in invasive species management and in managing these incredible ecosystems.
And I'll also note that both Gary Lovett, who founded the Catskill Science Collaborative, and Jamie Deppen, who managed it for 3 years, are on the call. And we would be remiss if we did not shout them out and say all these great projects are really because of you. And thank you for that.
And if you enjoyed today's presentations and you want to hear more about our Catskill Science Collaborative Fellows, there is going to be another similar presentation just like this on October 29th. So we hope to see you all there.